I burned the Quran in the Vatican. In front of hundreds of people, I placed the Muslims' holy book over a flame and let it burn. The screams, the crying, the despair still echo in my memory. I was Sister Benedetta Rossi, 60 years old, 40 years serving the Catholic Church. In that moment I felt triumphant, powerful, defending my faith. Today my name is Fatima. I wear hijab, I pray 5 times a day, and I recite the kalima with tears in my eyes. What happened to me in just 2 hours in that Vatican auditorium will shock you. A 22-year-old Malaysian young woman stood up from the audience and said, "I will answer your questions." Siti Aisha binti Rahman didn't shout, didn't curse at me, didn't try to attack me. She simply spoke the truth, and that truth destroyed 60 years of my life in minutes. But it wasn't a cruel destruction. It was the sweetest liberation I have ever experienced. Before continuing with my testimony, write in the comments where you are watching from. I want to know which countries this story of the Italian nun who converted to Islam in the Vatican itself is reaching, because what you're about to hear will change your perspective on transformation, forgiveness, and the power of responding to hatred with wisdom. The date was March 15, 2023. The Vatican's Paul VI audience hall was buzzing with an energy I had never felt before. This wasn't just any gathering. This was the official conference organized by the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, titled Divine Revelation and Prophetic Tradition, Bridges Between Christianity and Islam. As I walked through those marble corridors, my heels echoing against the ancient stones, I felt the weight of history and the tension in the air. Europe was experiencing unprecedented religious tensions, terror attacks in France, debates about hijabs in schools, mosque vandalism in Italy. The continent was a powder keg of interfaith conflict. The Catholic Church, under pressure to address these issues, had organized this conference as an attempt at dialogue. But I'll be honest with you, dialogue was the last thing on my mind that day. The audience hall was packed with over 400 people. Cardinals, Islamic scholars, journalists from major networks, diplomats from Muslim-majority countries, and academic theologians from universities across Europe. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and underlying hostility. I could see the skeptical glances between Christians and Muslims, the way people clustered in their religious groups, the whispered conversations that stopped when someone from the other side approached. I had been invited as Sister Benedetta Rossi, professor of apologetic theology at the Pontifical Gregorian University, known throughout Catholic academic circles for my fierce defense of Christian doctrine. What they didn't know was that I had come prepared for war, not peace. I had spent weeks preparing not questions for dialogue, but weapons for battle. In my briefcase, alongside my notes, was a copy of the Quran, not for study, but for demonstration. I was 60 years old. I had dedicated my life to defending Christ, and I believed it was time to expose what I saw as the falsehoods of Islam once and for all. When I was called to the podium, the hall fell silent. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me as I walked up those steps, my heart pounding not with nervousness, but with righteous fury. I had waited my entire career for this moment, a chance to publicly challenge Islam in the very heart of Christianity, the Vatican itself. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying across the silent auditorium, "today we speak of bridges between our faiths, but I ask you, how can we build bridges on foundations of lies?" The tension in the room was immediate and palpable. I could see Muslim attendees shifting uncomfortably in their seats, while some Christians nodded approvingly. I pulled out the Quran from my briefcase and held it high. "This book," I declared, "claims to be the final revelation from God. Yet it contradicts everything we know to be true about Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior." Without hesitation, I placed the holy book next to a candle I had prepared on the podium. The flame caught the pages slowly, and the smell of burning paper filled the air like incense of rebellion. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. Gasps echoed throughout the hall. A woman in hijab burst into tears. Several Muslim men stood up, shouting, "How dare you?" and "You've crossed every line." Security moved quickly to prevent anyone from rushing the stage, but I stood firm, unmoved by the chaos I had unleashed. "If you truly believe this book is from God," I said coldly, raising my voice above the commotion, "then prove it to me now." I had prepared 3 questions that I believed would expose the contradictions and violence I associated with Islam. "First," I continued, "where is your Allah? Why doesn't he appear? Why must you rely on blind faith? Second, why do Muslims walk in circles around a stone in Mecca? Is this not pure idol worship? And third, if Islam is truly a religion of peace, then why are so many terrorists Muslims? The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with shock and barely contained rage. Then, from the middle of the crowd, a calm yet firm voice cut through the tension. "I will answer your questions." All heads turned to see a young Malaysian woman rising from her seat. Siti Aisyah binti Rahman, just 22 years old, walked toward the podium with a composure that seemed impossible, given what had just transpired. She wasn't angry. She wasn't shouting. Her face showed only determination mixed with compassion. As she reached the microphone, she looked directly at me, then at the stunned audience. "I am not here to win an argument," she began, her English accented but crystal clear. "I am here to speak truth, because truth does not need fire, it needs understanding." Her words hit me like ice water, but I stood my ground, arms crossed, waiting for what I assumed would be emotional pleading or empty rhetoric. "You asked where our God is and why we cannot see him," Siti continued, her voice growing stronger. "The human eye cannot see electricity, yet it powers entire cities. We cannot see love, yet we feel it deeply in our hearts. We don't demand that the sun prove its light. We simply step outside and feel its warmth on our faces. In the same way, the existence of Allah is felt in every heartbeat, in every breath we take, in the intricate design of the universe around us." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Allah tells us in the Quran, 'Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth are signs for those who reflect.' The Creator reveals himself through his creation, not through theatrical appearances that would remove the test of faith that gives meaning to our choices." Addressing my second question, she smiled gently. "You asked why Muslims circle around the Kaaba. Do we worship a stone? No, we worship the one who commanded us to face it. The Kaaba is a direction, not a deity. It unites millions of Muslims from different races, cultures, and languages to stand shoulder to shoulder in prayer, remembering Allah together. Even Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, kissed the black stone and said, 'I know you are just a stone. You can neither harm nor benefit.' That is not idol worship. That is symbolic unity pointing us toward the one true God." Then came the most difficult question. Her voice deepened with emotion as she addressed terrorism. "The terrorists who claim to represent Islam betray everything our faith stands for. The Quran clearly states, 'Whoever kills a soul, unless for justice or to prevent corruption on earth, it is as if he has killed all of mankind.' Islam teaches compassion, justice, and forgiveness. These criminals are not believers. They are enemies of true Islam." As Siti stepped back from the microphone, something unexpected happened. Instead of returning to her seat, she remained at the podium and looked directly at me. "Sister Benedetta," she said softly, "you were brave to ask your questions. In the spirit of honest dialogue, may I now ask you 3 of mine?" The auditorium, which had been filled with murmurs of approval for her responses, fell silent again. I felt a chill run down my spine, but my pride wouldn't let me back down. "Ask whatever you want," I replied, though my voice sounded less confident than it had minutes before. Siti's first question cut like a surgical blade. "Is Jesus God, or is he a messenger of God? If he is God himself, then how could he cry out to God from the cross, saying, 'My God, why have you forsaken me?' Can God forsake himself?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. I opened my mouth to respond, but found myself hesitating for the first time. Her second question was even more precise. "Did Jesus ever say anywhere in your scriptures the exact words, 'I am God, worship me'? If his divinity is so central to Christianity, wouldn't he have stated it clearly and repeatedly?" My mind raced through decades of theological training, searching for a direct quote but coming up empty. The third question delivered the final blow. If God cannot die, and surely the creator of all existence cannot perish, then who actually died on the cross? If Jesus died, was God dead for 3 days? And if God was not dead, then what exactly was sacrificed? The logical trap was perfect, inescapable and devastating. I stood there, the woman who had burned the Quran just minutes earlier, now unable to answer the most basic questions about my own faith. The weight of 40 years of unexamined assumptions crashed down on me like an avalanche. For the first time in my adult life, I truly didn't know what to say. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. 400 people waited for my response. Some leaned forward in anticipation, others watched with a mixture of sympathy and discomfort. I had arrived that day with fire in my voice and certainty in my heart. But now my face was pale, my hands trembling, and my lips could barely form words. I opened my mouth trying to speak, but nothing came out except a strangled whisper. I don't know. The admission felt like a dagger in my chest. These weren't trick questions or theological puzzles. They were fundamental issues about the very core of Christian doctrine, questions that a professor of apologetic theology should answer without hesitation. My breathing became irregular, my shoulders began to shake, and for the first time in decades, my voice cracked with genuine emotion. I stepped back from the podium and collapsed into the chair beside it, covering my face with my hands. Then came the tears, not of anger or embarrassment, but of something far deeper, spiritual crisis. Everything I had built my identity on for 6 decades suddenly seemed uncertain. The confident nun who had walked up to that podium had been shattered by 3 simple questions from a 22-year-old student. I felt naked, exposed, vulnerable in a way I had never experienced. The walls I had built around my faith to protect it from doubt had crumbled, leaving me staring into an abyss of uncertainty. A young woman in the audience stood up, her voice soft but clear. I feel sorry for her, but I also want to understand what made her think that tearing down someone else's beliefs would strengthen her own. Her words were like a mirror, reflecting back the ugliness of what I had done. I had come to destroy, not to learn. I had come to humiliate, not to understand. City approached me gently, not with triumph in her eyes, but with genuine compassion. "We all search for truth," she said quietly. "Sometimes we search in books, sometimes in arguments, but sometimes truth finds us in silence, in doubt, in the moment when our certainty collapses. Sister Benedetta, I don't see you as an enemy. I see you as someone who took a painful but necessary step towards something greater." The hall had become a sacred space where pride met humility, where certainty encountered wisdom, and where a heart hardened by decades of religious arrogance began, slowly, to soften. After the conference ended, I found myself unable to leave. While other attendees filed out, discussing what they had witnessed, I remained seated, staring at the ashes of the Quran I had burned. City approached me carefully, as one might approach a wounded animal, with patience and genuine concern. "Sister Benedetta," she said softly, "would you like to talk?" I looked up at her through tear-stained eyes, this young woman who had just dismantled my entire worldview with grace and wisdom. Instead of gloating or lecturing, she simply sat beside me and waited. Over the following weeks, City and I met privately in a small cafe near the Vatican. She never pressured me, never pushed Islam upon me, never made me feel stupid for my ignorance. Instead, she simply answered my questions with the same patience she had shown during our public debate. I began to realize that everything I thought I knew about Islam had come from biased sources, from people who had never actually studied the religion seriously. "Why didn't you get angry when I burned the Quran?" I asked her one afternoon. City smiled gently. "The Quran teaches us that truth doesn't need to be defended with anger, and we made from them leaders guiding by our command when they were patient and were certain of our signs. Patience and certainty in truth are more powerful than any emotion." She began sharing verses from the Quran that spoke about Jesus, not as God, but as one of the most honored messengers. I was shocked to learn how much respect Islam showed for Christ, for Mary, for the Christian prophets I had spent my life studying. "We believe in Jesus," she explained. "We just don't believe he claimed divinity for himself." Slowly, carefully, she introduced me to Islamic concepts: Tawheed, the oneness of God, the role of prophets, the day of judgment, the importance of good deeds. Nothing seemed foreign or threatening when explained properly. In fact, much of it resolved contradictions that had puzzled me throughout my Christian education. For the first time in my life, theology made perfect, logical sense. What followed were the most intense months of my life. At 60 years old, I found myself questioning everything I had believed for 6 decades. I began reading the Quran in secret, comparing its teachings to the Bible I had studied for so long. I was amazed to discover that many of the moral teachings were identical, but the Quran's explanations were clearer, more logical, more consistent. I would lie awake at night, wrestling with profound questions. If Jesus never claimed to be God, why had Christianity built its entire foundation on that belief? If the Trinity wasn't clearly explained in the Bible, why was it considered essential doctrine? If Allah was the same God I had worshipped my entire life, why had I been taught to fear and hate Islam? City continued to meet with me, bringing books, answering questions, sharing her own story of faith. She told me how she had memorized the entire Quran as a teenager, how Islamic scholarship had shaped her understanding of the world, how her faith brought her peace and purpose. I envied that peace. It was something I realized I had never truly experienced. My prayers began to change. Instead of reciting familiar Catholic formulas, I found myself speaking directly to God, asking for guidance, begging for clarity. I visited the chapel where I had prayed for 40 years, but the statues and images that had once comforted me now seemed like barriers between me and the divine. I began experimenting with Islamic prayer, awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence. The physical movements, standing, bowing, prostrating, felt like a conversation with my entire body, not just my mind. The Arabic words, which Siti taught me phonetically, seemed to resonate in my soul even before I understood their meaning. The internal conflict was agonizing. I was Sister Benedetta Rossi, respected theologian, dedicated nun. How could I abandon everything I had worked for? What would my colleagues think, my family, the church that had given my life meaning and structure? But deeper than all these concerns was a growing certainty that I had found something I didn't even know I was looking for: absolute truth. The moment came on a quiet Tuesday evening in my small apartment near the Vatican. I had been reading Surah Al-Ikhlas. Say, He is Allah the One, Allah the Eternal, Absolute. He begets not, nor is He begotten, and there is none like unto Him. The simplicity and clarity of this statement about God's nature struck me like lightning. For 60 years I had struggled to understand the Trinity, to explain how God could be three and one simultaneously, to make sense of doctrines that required faith despite logical impossibility. Here in 4 simple verses was a description of God that my heart, mind, and soul could embrace completely. I fell to my knees in my apartment and wept, not tears of sadness, but tears of relief, of homecoming, of finally understanding. I called Siti, my voice shaking with emotion. "I'm ready," I whispered into the phone. "I want to embrace Islam." We met the next morning in a quiet mosque on the outskirts of Rome. The Imam, a gentle elderly man from Morocco, explained the Shahada to me in both Arabic and Italian. La ilaha illa Allah wa Muhammadun Rasul Allah. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is His messenger. As I pronounced these words, I felt something shift inside me. The burden of theological contradictions I had carried for decades simply vanished. The fear, the anger, the need to defend the indefensible, all gone. In their place was a peace so profound I could barely breathe. "What name would you like to choose?" the Imam asked kindly. I had thought about this for weeks. "Fatima," I said without hesitation, the name of the Prophet's beloved daughter, a woman of strength, wisdom, and devotion. It felt right, like putting on clothes that actually fit after a lifetime of wearing someone else's garments. The news of my conversion spread quickly through Catholic circles, then to international media. Vatican professor converts to Islam made headlines around the world. The reaction was swift and harsh from my former colleagues, but surprisingly supportive from many ordinary Catholics who had also struggled with theological questions they weren't allowed to ask. Today, as Fatima, my life has a clarity and purpose I never experienced as Sister Benedetta. I work closely with Siti, who has become not just my teacher but my sister in faith. Together, we organize interfaith dialogue sessions, not debates designed to win, but conversations designed to understand. Every week I meet with women from different backgrounds: Catholics struggling with doubts, Muslims facing Islamophobia, seekers searching for spiritual truth. I share my story not to convert anyone, but to show that it's possible to question, to search, to find peace even late in life. Many Christians have told me that my journey helped them examine their own beliefs more honestly. The mosque has become my sanctuary. 5 times a day I join my Muslim brothers and sisters in prayer, standing shoulder to shoulder, regardless of race, nationality, or social status. The diversity of the Muslim community amazed me. People from every continent, every culture, united in worship of the one God. My relationship with God has deepened in ways I never imagined possible. In Christianity, I often felt like I was approaching God through intermediaries, through Jesus, through Mary, through saints. In Islam, I speak directly to Allah, and I feel His presence in my life with unprecedented clarity. Siti often says that my conversion wasn't about winning or losing a debate. It was about 2 hearts connecting in the search for truth. She never tried to convert me. She simply lived her faith authentically and answered my questions with honesty and compassion. That's what true dawah looks like. Not arguments or pressure, but beauty, wisdom, and love. The most beautiful part of my new life is the absence of internal contradiction. Every Islamic teaching I learn fits perfectly with every other teaching, like pieces of a divine puzzle clicking into place. After decades of trying to reconcile irreconcilable doctrines, I finally have a faith that engages my heart, mind, and soul simultaneously. As I reflect on this journey from Sister Benedetta to Fatima, I realize that Allah didn't open my heart through force or fear, but through mercy and truth. He used a 22-year-old student from Malaysia to show a 60-year-old Italian nun that wisdom has no age, nationality, or gender. It belongs to anyone seeking genuine understanding. The most powerful lesson I learned is that truth expressed with love and compassion can penetrate even the most hardened heart. Siti could have responded to my provocation with anger, with insults, with the same aggression I had shown. Instead, she chose patience, wisdom, and respect. That choice changed not just my life, but the lives of everyone who witnessed our encounter. If you're watching this as a Muslim, remember that you never know who might be listening when you speak about Islam. Your words, your character, your response to hostility, all of these are forms of dawah. You might be speaking to the next Fatima without realizing it. Always represent Islam with the beauty and wisdom it deserves. If you're watching this as a Christian or person of another faith, I don't ask you to accept my conclusions, but I encourage you to ask honest questions about your beliefs. Don't be afraid to examine, to study, to seek truth wherever it leads. The God of truth is not threatened by sincere inquiry. If you're searching for spiritual meaning, know that it's never too late to find your path. I was 60 when I embraced Islam. Age, background, education, none of these are barriers to divine guidance. What matters is sincerity, humility, and an open heart. This story lives on not because a nun became a Muslim, not because a student won a debate, but because truth was spoken without pride, because respect overcame provocation, and because mercy triumphed over hatred. In a world drowning in arguments and division, that kind of compassion is truly revolutionary. If this story has touched your heart, please share this video with your friends, family, and social media networks. Someone in your circle might need to hear about the transformative power of truth expressed with love. Someone might be searching for the same peace I found. Your share could be the beginning of their spiritual journey. Remember, you never know what moment might become someone's turning point. Always speak truth with love, because somewhere someone's heart is waiting to be awakened. Barakallahu fiki. May Allah bless you all.